The tall, gangly thing?
Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by one of the 16 competitors that's going to be facing off at the North American Teamfight Tactics Regional Finals this upcoming weekend or next weekend whenever this video drops. Going to be looking for one of those 3 coveted spots at the World Championships in October. Today I'm joined by Pockygom. Pocky, thank you so much for being here.
Hello, it's Pocky.
Before we start, Pocky, for anyone who may not be super familiar with who you are, why don't you just go ahead first and tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I go by Pockygom, and I've been pretty much playing TFT since set 1. And only recently I've been really trying to participate in like the competitive aspect of the game. And recently I've been doing quite well for myself, I think. And I would say that's probably most of what's relevant here.
Okay, yeah, sure. So, I mean, you talked about before, you just recently started playing at a competitive level. Is TFT like your first venture into competitive games or sports or anything like that? Have you ever done that before?
Not sports, but I have tried to do Hearthstone and Shadowverse a bit. I didn't really go into like the actual competitive scene, but like when I did try to play, I tried to push ladder as hard as I could for those games. So like for Hearthstone, I think the peak rank I hit was like top 5 legend. And for Shadowverse, I tried to hit like the top 100 within a month of playing the game. And I was actually able to do that. Other than that, the game that I actually took the most seriously is actually a random kind of MMO game that probably most people don't know since it's really old, called Ragnarok Online. But it had a really cool system where it really required you to do a lot of math to do creating builds and stuff, as well as very flexible gameplay. And I would say that really helped build up like my skill sets, which between the card games and then kind of like the theory crafting from Ragnarok, that's really where I think going into TFT, I was able to adjust pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've had a lot of experience in other stuff that's kind of led you to TFT. And I want to talk about regionals, but before we do, I wanted to talk a little bit about Giant Slayer series. You're coming right out of that. The duo tournament, I believe you teamed with Rue, Team Neanderthals. How did you feel coming out of the tournament?
Initially, when I came into the tournament, day 1 went terribly, right? Like I was second lowest points with like 3 other players. But then the following days, well, I guess weeks really, I think I really brought it back, got some lucky games, some, I guess, creative / innovative games. And the overall performance that I had was top 4 as a like individual point carrier. So I feel pretty good coming out of that tournament, just seeing how despite starting off really terribly, I was still able to be the top 4 players in the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, one of the cool things about the 2v2v2v2 format is that it kind of leads to these like interesting duo moments that you don't really get to see in traditional tournaments. Did you and Rue have any of these cool duo moments where, like, I don't know, someone made their board weaker, you're working together to kind of play the game slightly differently than you normally would in solo queue?
There were a few times I did try to do it, but then it never actually panned out the same way like Ramblin' and Robin's moment worked out, right? Because Ramblin' and Robin, their moment was to outplace me as well. So that was like, that was what feels bad. Now I tried to do it, but then it ended up just not helping out anyway. So I didn't exactly have my own duo moment like that.
Well, now that you've kind of experienced that format, how do you feel about the 2v2 format, like in the future? Do you think it's a viable tournament structure?
I do think it is a viable tournament structure. I actually think even possibly like a 4 vs 4 could be very interesting. I watch like there's this game called Kart Rider. Some people probably have played it. They actually have a format where it's like team based, and the only thing that matters is who goes first, even. which is like that would be an interesting format itself for TFT, right? Like,
yeah, I don't think that's something that's been explored at all.
Because people just compile all the points based on the placements, but what if the goal was just to get one player on your team to be the first?
Yeah,
Because
that's really
that changes
cool.
kind of the mentality of the approach of the game.
Yeah, I could even see like at these moments at like 3-2 or 4-1, like the team is looking at everybody's board and recognizing like, okay, well, who's in the best spot? Like, can we pivot our boards to just grief the strong players on the other team, and just you have 3 support players essentially for like this one carry? That's a really interesting way of playing out a tournament. I don't think anyone's really thought about that yet. So let's kind of pivot into regionals. You know, people are super excited to see who's going to be making it to Worlds. How have you actually been preparing for your run at regionals?
So the preparation is pretty recent since we are just coming out of the dual tournament. I would say the main thing I've been doing since specifically Melton Hart has not been playing any TFT since he's not qualified for regionals and did not care about the dual tournament at all, really. Because actually, talking about that, the dual tournament, I was supposed to partner with Melt. But Socks opted out of the tournament because he's busy with like real life stuff. And then it ended up Melt having to be a team leader, so I couldn't have like probably the best duo squad going into the tournament. So that was feels bad. But I think for regionals, I don't have Melt as like an actual person to bounce off ideas right now. So I've been talking with specifically Yubin a lot. People might not know him because he's a KR player, but he's been streaming with like NA times pretty much. And right now he's pretty high on the ladder. So I've been watching him a lot to kind of learn Dispatch because he's doing super well on Dispatch.
How important do you think it actually is to have that person to bounce off ideas when it comes to playing TFT? Do you feel like that's more, you get more out of it than just playing by yourself?
I think so, because like ultimately, as a player, regardless of how unbiased you want to make yourself be for these kind of like high variance games, right? It's like impossible as an individual to really have the full scope. So being able to like bounce off ideas with other players that are like as good, better, or like even worse opinions are valid a lot of the times. You just need to kind of filter through their opinions and really pull out what's good and match what aligns with you, really. So I think having people who you can actually bounce ideas off of is really the secret to improving quickly in this game. And really, when it comes to TFT, the patch cycle is so rapid, you're constantly forced to improve. Otherwise, you kind of get left behind by the new metas and all that stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think it's important for every player, especially at a caliber that you're at, to be able to quickly learn and adapt the game. So I think it makes sense if you're looking to bounce ideas off of another person. Now, going into regionals, I'd love to know your confidence level going into regionals. I mean, you've had some really great success in tournament. You had a 4th place at a Challenger Series, a 1st place at a Challenger Series, not as much success in mid-set finale. I believe you finished 16th, didn't make it out of day 2 or day 3, whatever that was. So one small hiccup, but overall, strong result. How do you feel going into the biggest tournament of the set?
I feel pretty good considering the most recent tournament result. I know, like, for this set, I didn't get to play that many tournaments since I won the first Challenger Series. I didn't really get to play anything in between until the actual mid-set happened, right? And at mid-set, yeah, it was a little bit unfortunate what happened, but I didn't really take it too poorly. I think, to an extent, I feel pretty comfortable in tournament now. After, like, I remember when I was in set 4, when I was playing Challenger Series then, I was quite nervous a lot of the times and wasn't really sure how I would perform during the tournament. But then, like, coming to set 5, I feel a lot more just comfortable with the whole thing. It's kind of routine at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that. I mean, it's obviously it's important to have confidence going into tournaments. Now, at regionals, there's going to be 16 of the best players in North America, a really, really strong lobby all around. What do you think actually sets you apart from the other players at the tournament?
That is a hard question because like ultimately a lot of the players are really good, and the reason that they're really good is because they can learn the patch quickly, and they have like the good fundamentals to carry them through each of the games and outplace other players, right? I think when I look at the list of players, the main thing that does jump out to me is like most of them are not that willing to experiment that much. In my opinion, I feel like a lot of them, they do end up outside of certain players like I think Nubal, Ramcath, sometimes like Robin and Kyun. I feel like outside of those players, I do feel that there's kind of they have a very set way of playing and approaching the games that makes it almost boring to watch sometimes because you kind of see the same gameplay occur over and over. And like when you get into that, you kind of restrict the like what I like to think of as just like the mental agility that you'd need when you are playing in a higher stakes game. And you're not given the typical route that you're used to.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying. I mean, talking about mental agility, I feel like that's a great term to kind of describe the way you're playing. Because I know when I've watched you, I've seen you reroll a bunch of different things. I think I've seen you take all these different routes to get to whatever your end game is going to be. So would you say that like fundamentally you would approach the game differently? I know you had mentioned earlier that like you and kind of your group of friends that you guys play together, I think you had mentioned Melt and Rue, that you feel like you guys are kind of different players than the pack. Do you feel like that's specifically because you're willing to experiment?
Specifically, I wouldn't say it's like a group thing.
Okay.
I think it's more of a personal thing where I do like to just experiment with, and also do research a lot when it comes to the game. I haven't done that as much in 5.5 because the game didn't change that much going into this set as opposed to like usual. But in 5.0, I was pretty much always ahead of the meta. In my mind, I was always ahead of the meta. Whenever it was forcing the kind of like new flavor of the month, I already played that like a few days or a week before. And then because of like me keeping track of all of the meta developments, I was able to like really just perform well on 5.0. I think that was like one of the main things that helped me. I think that's part of the reason I'm not doing as well this set, at least on ladder, because maybe it's like lower motivation to do so since there's no like real snapshot to be playing for. But when it comes to just the people I talk to, I would say they're not as experimented. Yeah. Not as much.
Okay. I mean, again, it's one of the things that separates you from the pack. So I think it's kind of important to hold on to that. Now, at regionals, only 3 players are going to be making it to World. So I'd love to know your prediction going into the event or coming out of the event, however you want to say it. What 3 players are going to be representing North America at Worlds in October?
If I had to say, I would probably put Robin as like kind of my number 1 pick. I know Sox is doing really well in the set, and he's known to have like super consistent tournament results and stuff. He has like the pedigree. It's like the top pedigree for NA TFT. But he is busy with like real life stuff, so I could kind of see like Robin being the best performer going into Worlds. Uh, who would I say otherwise?
Well, that if it was Socks, Robin, and I'm assuming are you putting yourself in there as well, or are you saying you're looking for maybe a different third person?
Yeah, I could add myself there, but then I kind of will just leave myself out for
Okay,
this.
sure, yeah.
But I feel like it's probably yeah, Stocks would be second just because like he has really he's the real deal, I guess. But
Yeah,
then it would probably be between Nuval, Sesko, and Bert for
Okay.
the third person in my mind. I don't know exactly who. Like pretty much all set, I've been saying Nuval is just the best player, but there are like the tournament results. People always bring it up.
Yeah,
He doesn't do as well in tournament.
People do point to saying like tournament's a small sample size, and I feel bad saying this because I love Nuval. I love watching him play. I want him to succeed so badly in every tournament. I keep saying this is going to be the one where he pops off. He's going to finally succeed. But Nuval, the truth is he has the largest sample size of tournament data and some of the worst results. I mean, do you feel like is there a difference? You've done it both, where climbing the ladder, being super high on ladder, and winning Challenger Series, like doing well in tournament. I mean, do you feel like it actually is different? Like, are nerves a big part of tournament play that like can actually just affect you?
For sure, you can really like, since in my mind, TFT, like a lot of people can point towards like statistics, probability, and then you have like the slight mechanical parts of like positioning. But I think overall, the game of TFT is not too different from like how you would approach performing well in like poker or mahjong, where it's like it's your mentality. But mentality is what matters the most. And if like I don't want to say Nuval is someone who lets himself get psyched out, because I feel like he has a very strong mental usually, but I'm pretty sure some people would say so.
I mean, either way, I know that there's a lot of people who really want to see him do well, myself included. I mean, it seems like Nuval is like, sometimes there's even other competitors who would rather just see him do well because everyone knows how good he is. And it's like, he's due for a win, right?
Yes.
And, bouncing off of that, in Teamfight Talk Show last week, or actually just a couple days ago, Soju had made a comment talking about ladder points being a better, more indicative of skill than tournament play. Do you agree with that statement? Is ladder actually the best representation of a player's skill?
There's some issues with ladder for sure, because your approach when you play ladder games can change based on like your lobby. You're not always being matched with like good players necessarily when you're playing in solo queue. But I would say there's no like real thing that considers someone a tournament player over a ladder player. It's just that when it does boil down to it, some people do kind of fool around on ladder a bit more than they would on tournament. And when it does come to tournament, it's possible that like their LP is not indicative of their skill. Like I think Ramkev is like the prime example of that, where like most of set 5 and like even set 4, I think he was like 1k LP the entire time. He was just like stuck at 1k LP, and then like everyone would like hit, all of his viewers would just like kind of make fun of it, like 10th floor resident, permanent resident. But like when he comes into tournament, he had good results. I mean, obviously some of it could just be like he was the luckier one of the players. But I do think, although ladder, like the very top of ladder, is indicative of skill, there are players who probably exist that are a lot lower LP than their skill really should place them if they kind of took ladder a bit more seriously.
Yeah,
I think that's my opinion on that.
even going back to what you were saying before, it makes sense if you are treating ladder as a way to practice more of these experimental builds, to limit tests, to learn what works before the meta is actually developed. Like, you are probably going to take more losses than you would if you were just playing the most optimal comp every game, or if you're only playing to the strongest odds. It just depends whether you're looking to win or learn, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Exactly.
way before, you said that you've been playing TFT since set 1. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, what is it about the game that just keeps having you come back?
So this is actually something I talk with like Melt and Art about, because we both also come from card game background as well. And just like comparing card games to TFT, you could call it like the decision tree is way broader. Like, for when it comes to a card game, there is the variance aspect where mentality does matter a good amount, but a lot of the, what do you call it? A lot of the time when you play card games, you play it enough that like even the variance, you don't have to play every single situation out regardless. Like, it becomes like pretty rote. Well, for TFT, you can argue that if you simplify your game plan enough, that TFT becomes like that. And that is where the idea that TFT is a simple game comes from, right? Like, oh, I'm going to force this comp. Therefore, I'll hold these units, make these items. And then at that point, when you simplify the game that much, right, from like comparing how you would see like Socks play, if you simplify it that much, the game really does become simple. But then if you try to approach it from like the wider decision pool that like a lot of the top players try to approach it from, where you're trying to flex between multiple comps, you try to play your strongest board and all that kind of, all the good stuff that people like. That's where like the complexity of the game really is satisfying, when you actually get to a point where you understand it well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it opens the door to self-expression even, right? Like, going back to what you were saying about before with like being experimental and like wanting to learn about the game. Like, the more complex the game, the more complex the decision tree is, then the more of you that is seen in your gameplay. And that I think that I agree. That's a really beautiful thing about TFT. Now, Pocky, that's actually all the questions I had for you. But before we go, is there anything you wanted to shout out?
Anything I want to shout out? Honestly, I feel like I want to shout out I Miss Void Sins. Like, that dude, I feel like he'll do actually really well in the tournament.
Interesting.
And people are kind of sleeping on him because he's kind of quote unquote a nobody, but he's been playing it since set 1 along with me. It's like me, Melt, and I Miss Void Sins. We've all been playing since set 1. We've always get like pretty high on ladder, but we never really like was part of the community back then. But like right now, he's doing pretty well. He's playing on a Smurf named I Miss Johnny Sins, which is a funny name. But I'm pretty sure he's gonna do super well. Like, he's coming off the mid-set finale win as well, right? So I think people are sleeping on him.
All right.
It's
Well, yeah. I mean, definitely ending with a hot take there. I mean, I think that most people would not agree with you, or at least would not necessarily expect I Miss Void Sins to do super well. But, I mean, I'll take your opinion over my opinion, or pretty much anyone else's that I'm going to hear on Twitter or on social media. So maybe I'm undervaluing I Miss Void Sins. Maybe he's going to show up. Maybe he's going to win again. He did have some crazy games at mid-set finale, that's for sure. But Pocky, again, thank you so much for joining me. I had a lot of fun talking to you. And to everyone watching, thank you guys for watching all the way through this. For more TFT coverage and content, make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.